Okay, good morning, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. All individuals entering city-operated facilities, including City Hall, are required to wear a non-medical face mask. Those at the table are not required to wear masks while sitting, as long as they're distanced 6 feet from anyone else. Once you leave your seat at the table, you must put your mask back on. As directed by Manitoba Health, we are requesting people avoid close contact within 2 meters with anyone showing symptoms of a respiratory illness, such as coughing or sneezing. If you are experiencing flu-like symptoms, we are requesting that you excuse yourself from the room. My name is Marla Billinghurst. I am chairing the meeting this morning. With me today are Mr. Doug Marks and Mr. Brent McIntyre. The assessor this morning is Mr. Ryan Valderrama, and the recording secretary is Ms. Michelle Neepin. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony, followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today, and the session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record, and use of cell phones is not permitted except by approval of the chair. All right. So it appears that the property on the docket today is 1 Vulcan Ridge Drive, and it is on for 4 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So are we dealing with each year individually?
It's almost similar in terms of the information that's provided, with an exception that 18 and 19 are the same, and then 20 and 21 are the same. So I'm assuming I can present one for each, or I don't know how you want to proceed, Madam Chair, in order to facilitate this faster or more efficiently. I would say maybe 18 and 19 would go first, and then 20 and 21, since they have the same, almost similar evidence, Madam Chair.
That would be fine with me. Mr. Neufeld?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right.
Ours is on one report, and there's only 2 or 3 changes, and they're listed separately.
All right then. So I don't see any problem with doing that together. Can I just ask if when you guys are presenting, if you can speak into the microphone, because I have a bit of trouble hearing on my end. That's all, if you're leaning too far back.
Which one should be? This This one is fine. Okay, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's loud enough.
Okay.
That's good enough.
That's much better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, please, Ms. Neepen will swear you in, and then you can proceed.
I want to put the percentages in, right?
Yes.
No, I'm not going to. I'm serious, I can't. Okay, go ahead.
Can you state your full name, please?
Rocky.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I can't even read my ass. You can stand it.
Can you state your full name, please? Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You happen to know if I sent in this?
I don't believe I received anything.
Okay, yeah.
So did you walk up the stairs?
I was assisted by the guy downstairs.
Oh. There is elevators here.
Okay. Mr. Valderrama, please proceed when you're ready.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just a clarification on the appellant's brief on page 21 and 22. If you may clarify this one, there's a date that says April 30, 2018. The information provided is dated April 30, 2018, and which is, I think, post reference to April 1st, 2018. Just it's with regard to this Axiom Infrastructure, Rivera and Axiom Infrastructure form a joint venture to share ownership of 32 long-term care homes. That's the title of the media release, Madam Chair. Just want to point that out, that it's dated April 30, 2018.
Okay, thank you very much.
And if I may proceed, Madam Chair.
Sure.
The first one has a file number of 19-6007. It has a roll number of 03-093-003200. It is located at 1 Falcon Ridge Drive. We're dealing with a roll year of 2018 and a reference date of April 1st, 2016. There are multiple class and liability. With the first one, I will just skip on the residential 2 since it has no assessed value. The second one is an institutional, it is classified as an institutional property exempt with an exempt assessed value of 182,000. The third one has a classification of institutional property with a liability of taxable school exempt, which is assessed at $30,356,000. And the last one has a classification of institutional property with a liability of taxable with an assessed value of $2,721,000. The total assessed value for this property for 2018 and 2019 is $33,259,000. The property is a nursing home with 1 to 3 stories, 4 sections, and an effective years built of 2001 to 2008. It has a construction class of masonry bearing walls with an average wall height between 10 to 12 feet, a zoning of residential multifamily with a land area of 313,426 square feet, a planned area of 76,386 square feet, with a basement area of 15,718 square feet, and a gross floor area of 155,342 square feet. On page 2 is a cost valuation summary. Using the replacement cost new of the building at $32,135,059. It has an accrued depreciation for the building of $2,874,059, giving it a depreciating cost for the building of about $29,261,000. It also has depreciated cost of detached structures of about $91,000, giving it a total depreciated cost of $29,352,000 for the building. A land valuation of $3,907,000, giving it a total value of $33,259,000. And on page 3 are some aerial photos, a couple of aerial photos for the subject property. And on page 4 is more detailed cost summary for the building section. And right below it is the some detached structure details, what those valuations are or under cost. And the third section of page 4 is the land valuation. There are 3 and they are all within the net rate of $12.46 or $12.46 to $12.67 per square foot. On page 5, again, it's a classification and liability allocation. On page 6, I have 4 comparables for land sales. The first one is located at Waverly Street. It has a land area of 306,516 square feet. And it has a sale price per square foot of about $16.08. Comparable 2 is located on John Angus Drive. It has 215,996 square feet with a sale price per square foot of $14.35 per square foot. Comparable 3, it is located on Southview Crescent with a land area of $263,966. The sale price per square foot is about $13.64 per square foot. And the last comparable for land sale is located on Cal Gardner Drive. It has 166,905 square feet with a sale price per square foot of $13.19. Right below it on page 6 still is the map of the subject property and comparable land sales. On page 7 is a zoning information with regard to the property. Pages 8 to 12 are the cost report for the subject property, detailing the building, the detached structures, and the land cost. On page 13 is just the 3 approaches to value, the cost approach, sales comparison approach, and income approach coming from the Government of Manitoba website. And on page 5 is municipal board decision on using cost for care homes. That's from pages 15 to 20. And it's the same presentation, Madam Chair, for 2019 as well. If you want me to read through the just page 1 for 2019 information. I think it's just a file number that's different.
Okay, thank you.
Would you want me to just say the file number for 2019, Madam Chair?
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, for 2019, the file number is 19-6008. And all information are similar or the same as the 2018. And that's my presentation, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Neufeld, Mr. Mercury, do you have questions?
Yes, sir. I'll just start with a couple of preliminary questions. One of the issues identified was liability to taxation. So there's not a dispute that it's personal care home. The vast majority of the building is school tax exempt. There's the one issue that's been identified has been the scope of the full exemption for the place of religious worship. So you'll notice in the assessor's material that for both years, there's a portion of the space that is totally exempt, and that is for an area of the property that's been reserved for weekly worship, so effectively synagogue services that are held fairly regularly. So if you look at the photographs in Mr. Neufeld's brief at page 10, if everyone has that. And I could just ask Mr. Valderrama if you have that photograph. So first of all, Mr. Valderrama, it's correct that we're looking at your first brief, the 182,000. My understanding is that is earmarked, if you will, for the area that's shown on the top of page 10 of Mr. Neufeld's brief. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so you are aware that in addition to that space, there is an expanded area space, which is called a multi-purpose room, which is identified as an MPR or multi-purpose room space, which is just below that photograph.
Looks like it is a multi-purpose room. Yes, correct.
Okay, and are you aware of the purpose for which that additional space is used?
No, I'm not aware of any.
So you wouldn't be aware then that that space is also used for religious services on the weekends, effectively overflow space, which is used regularly, as I understand?
I'm not aware of any of those. Yes.
So if that space is used for religious services, you would agree that that would be, or should be classified as exempt space, correct?
Well, it is, as mentioned just a few minutes ago, it is a multi-purpose room, so it could be used by, for whatever reason, right? So it's, I have no knowledge or any information that if this is used as part of the synagogue or a religious purpose room, or
So just to be clear, you're not aware of what the primary purpose is of that particular space?
of the multi-purpose room. No.
Right. You're not aware?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Those are my questions for Mr. Valderrama.
Thank you.
Mr. Neufeld will have
Thank you very much.
In regard to the costing, and I've just sent some rebuttal information to the secretary that hopefully gets circulated. Wanted to ask about, first of all, on page 1, you say that this is masonry bearing construction,
Yes, it was coded as a masonry bearing.
and on pages 8 and 9, you again say masonry bearing wall, cavity brick with block backup, so a double brick.
Yes, that's correct.
Have you had a chance to inspect the property?
No, I wasn't able to.
How about historical pictures from the public domain?
Yes, forgot to, yeah, it's, I was supposed to present that. I could present that later on. Madam Chair, I forgot. I have it here with me. I apologize. I got some pictures on the website. That's correct.
Okay. And if the property, and I have the Marshall and Swift page here in front of me, which you're all getting shortly, hopefully, there's a fairly significant difference in cost between masonry block and wood frame, is there not?
Yes, I would, yes, that's correct.
Now, you've selected code 313 in Marshall and Swift. I don't know if the board's familiar with Marshall and Swift. It's a costing service. It's electronic based or printed manual. I have the printed manual here, which has the same numbers in. That's correct. You use Marshall and Swift.
Yes, that's correct. It's Marshall and Swift, based on Marshall and Swift.
And code 313 was the what you selected, convalescent hospital.
That's correct.
Did you read the description of convalescent hospitals in Marshall and Swift?
No, I wasn't able to. No, I wasn't able to.
Are there any treatment rooms in the building?
Without inspecting the property, without.
Doesn't a personal care home by design, they don't offer treatment, do they?
Just looking at the pictures here, the interior photos that I have, I cannot, I'm not 100% sure if there is or there is no treatment rooms. But in the picture, in my last picture, it seems like, yeah, I cannot determine that 100%, Madam Chair, if there is any treatment rooms, or if there is any or there is none.
But you're calling it a hospital. It's not a hospital.
It's coded as a convalescent hospital.
You're sticking by that it's a hospital?
Convalescent hospital, yes.
In that case, wouldn't it be fully exempt?
Question. I cannot answer the question, Madam Chair. I'm not. I don't have the information regarding hospitals at this point, Madam Chair, in front of me, so I cannot answer the question.
Well, if it were a hospital providing hospital service under Manitoba law, it's 100% exempt. Now, the assessment department is calling it school tax exempt because it's not a hospital. It's a housing for seniors, which is a different category altogether.
Well, that is what the property type on my page 1 says. It is a nursing home, and we agree on that one, that it is a nursing home. The cost that was used, the 313 code 313 convalescent hospital, only indicates to the building that we used as a code, and not necessarily the actual use or what's going on inside the hospital.
Doesn't a hospital require the use, for example, of oxygen piped through buildings, suction throughout the building, areas that are set up to be sterile for treatment, as well as other infrastructure for this?
That could be a hospital.
Operating theaters, perhaps?
Operating theaters? Oh, you mean surgery and
surgery?
All
that? Yes. Is there a single surgery in this building?
Again, as I've mentioned, the actual use for this is a nursing home, and we have coded it under cost that it is a convalescent hospital in terms of the building itself. However, with all those things that you mentioned, Mr. Neufeld, I don't know if there is any without really inspecting it thoroughly inside.
Is there a doctor on site?
I'm not sure.
Okay, Mr. Neufeld, I think you've made your point on this. And Mr. Valderrama has answered.
Well, I was just actually a bit stalling for time. I was just going to ask the secretary, did you send forward those attachments I sent you? Okay.
The second attachment you sent is the same one that you gave.
Right. And the first one, the Marshall and Swift page?
Yes, everybody should have those down.
Yeah, so what you're seeing is what the same thing I have here, which is the Marshall and Swift description of a convalescent hospital. Hard to read. I have another copy here if you want to read my paper. I can't read it either. Let's see if I can enlarge it. I think the key issue is look underneath lighting, plumbing, and mechanical, and note that therapy facilities and minimum hospital facilities are a requirement under this. It's not a hospital. So, all right, I'm moving on. In your costing analysis, did you look at any actual costs of projects that you're aware of?
There were permits that were pulled a few years ago. So there were permits.
But I meant we're now dealing with the 2016 cost. Did you look at the costs of any buildings in actual costs of any buildings in 2016?
No,
Okay.
with an exception of the Marshall and Swift.
And
The
did
replacement
you,
cost.
did you engage a qualified contractor to give you a building code estimate?
No, I did not.
Now, aren't those three issues, aren't those the three things that people who prepare cost must do, is look for other projects, engage a qualified contractor, and the last one, the last resort is a cost manual. You're aware of that? That's in the IAAO?
Now you made me aware of it. The thing with those ones, I believe, from the courses I took, they are all for appraisal purposes. And what we're doing here, I think, is we went to the cost manual of the Marshall and Swift instead of going through contractors and all those that you mentioned, aside from the cost manuals of Marshall and Swift. However, of course, I mean, the Marshall and Swift always uses the replacement cost new, which I would think would be right around the ballpark figures of what a construction contractor estimate would be.
Where is Marshall and Swift published?
We have a hard copy, and then
No, but where's the offices for Marshall and Swift? You know, you're aware it's in Los Angeles, in the United States, correct?
yes,
And how do they account for Canadian costs?
I'm not sure.
Code differences.
I don't know.
Okay. So you don't think a local flavor might be, I mean, we are talking about a very, very large difference of over $10 million in initial construction costs. So I'm just wondering if, given that, wouldn't it be prudent to go to our local market and get a cost from a contractor? I get mine for free, but you know, you pay for it. They're not that much money.
Well, we go by permits on the first, and during when we first value the property, and when we put all of these new buildings in, we go with the permits and evaluate the value of the permits as well to verify how much was spent or how much is the construction cost. If I may, I do have here with me some of the construction or the permits that were closed back in 2000, as early as 2008. And just in 2008 alone, there was worth 22,970,000 worth of building permits that were closed. So, I mean, having that and verifying with the Marshall and Swift, I think we have a good ballpark figure of where our starting point should be. And then as time goes on, of course, we rely more on the cost manuals, the Marshall and Swift cost manuals.
Now you're talking about the permits. The 2008, that wasn't the original construction, was it?
No, it was just, I believe, closed sometime in 2008.
There was an addition, correct?
There were also additions back in 2009 and 10.
And I presented the board with all of these as well.
Okay.
But in those permits, there was also code upgrades required as well, if you look through the list. As well as the cost of attaching an addition to an existing building. Doesn't that usually cost a fair bit more?
Yes.
In regard to the depreciation that you've applied, how was that calculated? I noticed that most of them are set at 14%. Although there's another section that's at 6%. So 14 and 6%. So how was that calculated?
Normal depreciation would be based on the age.
Okay, so what's the math on that? Like, did you calculate that?
It's based on the age.
Did you
It's
calculate
15
that,
years old.
or was that the Marshall and Swift calculation?
No, it's based on age. It says on.
But that's part of the Marshall and Swift report, correct?
Yes, it is part. Yes.
And you are aware that they use a style of depreciation that differs from what's embraced by the Appraisal Institute and the IAAO,
No, I'm not aware of it.
that they use tables?
No, I'm not aware of it.
I have that section as well. What's the economic life of this building?
I don't have that information with me. All I have is the age, which is 15 years old. And there's one building that's 8 years old.
Yeah, but don't you need to know the economic life of it to determine that?
See if I can calculate that. It's about 100 years.
Sorry,
About 100 years, give or take.
I'm
It's an
looking
estimate.
at Marshall and Swift here, and I note
You
that
have
they're
something there?
providing it a 45 years for C class and 40 years for D class.
Okay.
So if you had the wrong classification, a hospital versus, or sorry, masonry block versus wood, and their rates differ by 5 percentage points, that would indicate a different lifespan, correct?
Not sure. I cannot answer the question.
Okay. And are you familiar with the age life method?
Yep.
And isn't that what the IAAO advises you to use?
Age life method. Yeah, that's correct.
But this isn't the age life method. This is the Marshall and Swift method, correct?
Again, I mean, it's based on age. If I look at it here, there's some indication that it is. It looks like it is based on the age. It's on the age life method.
Well, I'll read you what they say, that
Okay.
that their mathematical curves, based on actual cases of sales and mortality to which empirical mathematical curves have been matched. They are averages and as such must be used with care, using effective age and modifying for above or below normal utilization, wear and tear, obsolescence, and preferences. And they never depreciate to 100% either, do they?
No.
We don't have the math calculation on it. It's just what Marshall and Swift
Yes.
provided. Okay. In regard to other forms of depreciation, did you not consider other forms?
No. I don't see anything that should be considered more than the depreciation, because we are using replacement cost new here, and the replacement cost new always addresses the functional obsolescence when they get an estimate out based on replacement cost new.
How many personal care homes have 3 sets of kitchens, 3 sets of dishwashing areas, and 3 sets of serving areas,
I'm not sure.
each handling different forms of food?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, isn't that a super adequate obsolescence that's incurable?
Again, there could be the needs for it. That's why they exist in this building. They needed to have 3 kitchens, probably, but they exist there. They don't just exist there because they're super adequate, or they just want to put a lot of kitchens in there. I'm pretty sure there is a purpose to it, and serving probably a lot of clients with different needs. I don't know what the purpose is.
Okay, well, I'll be a bit more specific. The site was planned and built by a community for, I wonder what the right word is here, for mostly Jewish people of Jewish faith. And it has 3 kitchens, meat, dairy, and mixed. 3 dishwashing areas, meat, dairy, mixed. Each of the serving stations on the 3 floors, there are 4 serving areas that are separated by meat, dairy, and other. Is that what you would expect to find in another personal care home?
Well, the usual personal care home, I don't know if they would have the same setup. I have no information or knowledge of that.
Then in regard to, you said that Marshall and Swift, by using replacement cost new, accounts for design issues, but what about economic obsolescence? Aren't all funding for personal care homes, it goes through the government? It's a government controlled system, correct?
Partly, I would say.
Government controlled.
And the funding is keeps personal care homes operational is partly funded by the government, I would say.
Right, and there's a set amount that people who go to personal care homes can contribute, have to contribute. And then the government makes up the balance. But they also set the standards, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, we've all become acutely aware in the last few months that personal care homes aren't up to snuff in protecting the inhabitants from communicable diseases. Is that not a form of obsolescence?
I cannot consider that as an obsolescence, but in my opinion,
well, an economic obsolescence.
No, I don't. No, I cannot agree or disagree with that one.
Well, isn't economic obsolescence proven by the impact on the sale? So if you put a property like this in the market, would not the buyer consider the need for ongoing constant upgrades to meet the Manitoba healthcare requirements?
Well, for this specific property, I think it may meet the requirements of the public health or Manitoba government. That's just my opinion, looking at the pictures.
Well, I'm not talking about meeting the standard. I'm talking about the market's reaction and economic obsolescence to the fact that they're going to buy a building that has the potential for a lot of ongoing costs to meet government standards, which keep changing and improving.
I don't know.
Okay.
Mr. Neufeld, I think Mr. Valderrama has answered this question to the best of his
That's fine.
ability.
I think that these are very, very major issues, and my concern here is that the assessment department rarely considers all forms of depreciation as if they do not exist and only physical is to be counted. And this is a special use property. A special use property carries its own forms of depreciation, and that's the point. I'll get into that later. In relation to the land sales you have, and they are on page 6. I'm just wondering if you could just give me a quick description of what each of those sales was developed to.
I cannot say what they became. However, based on the zoning, it's just they are zoned as multifamily, residential multifamily.
I think it's fairly safe to say that they were all developed for multifamily for apartment blocks, correct? Or do you, or unless okay, let me rephrase.
I think the South View was for apartment, yes, or multifamily.
Were any of them developed for a personal care home?
I am not aware. I don't know.
Why don't your land sales match the highest and best use of the building? Unless you're telling us that the highest and best use of the building is not a personal care home.
Well, it's based on the zoning, and the zoning allows for personal care home, which is the multifamily zoning. Well,
let me just back that up. Within the theory as written and supported by the IAAO, the Appraisal Institute, and any other organization, the highest and best use is the key, is it not?
Yes. As if
And
it is vacant.
they also say that once a building is built on it, the highest and best use becomes the building that's built unless it is more profitable to demolish and rebuild, correct?
Right.
Now, and they also say that the land sales under the cost approach must match the same highest and best use. And that's not the case here, is it?
The highest and best use also allows for something like this, this building to be built. Based on the zoning itself, I do agree with that the highest and best use for this property may be for multifamily. However, the zoning allows for something like a care home to be built on this property, which is also the highest and best use.
Well, let's move out of the theoretical into the practical. If you were intending to build an apartment block on this land, wouldn't you have to demolish or spend a lot of money modifying the subject to meet that highest and best use of the land?
Again, it is an if. We don't know. I mean, if really this will become demolished in a few years, or if a prudent investor would go in and say, oh yeah, I can demolish it, or I can go to the other side and just build or buy that one, which is already empty vacant lot.
If you're going to change the use and rely on land from other uses, don't you have to consider the cost of making it meet that highest and best use? You're taking a personal care home highest and best use and saying it's the same as multifamily, but they're not the same, are they?
Again, this is an if statement, right?
Well,
So it's
okay.
I don't know what even tomorrow would bring, right?
I'm not trying to, I hope you realize.
I understand that.
No, I'm not trying to put you in the spot. We've been working on this project for a long time. You just happen to be the guy who's standing right there.
I understand, and I'm just trying to my opinion on ifs and all that. So I don't know.
And I think those are the questions I have on your presentation. And I'm just going to, maybe Mr. Murphy has a follow-up. I just want to double check. There was just one follow-up on page 13. And you described the cost approach. The second paragraph cost approach, the approach is also used in the case of new properties that have not been affected by the various forms of depreciation. So your text that you have here does acknowledge there are more than one form of depreciation, correct?
We only have a normal depreciation considered.
Well, normal is your word, but you're only using physical depreciation, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was, thank you.
Are those your questions?
Yes, those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Marks, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Yes, I do. As far as the building construction is concerned, that is cinder block for bearing walls only, and the rest are stick built, non-load bearing walls.
Just double check on all the buildings. On page 4, there are 4 building sections. They are all masonry bearing walls. So building all of them are masonry bearing walls.
Okay. And the class of the building is institutional.
I'm sorry, class?
Class of the building is institutional.
Oh, classification. Institutional property, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. McIntyre, do you have any questions?
Just one question. Was a cost letter sent to the owner at the completion of construction?
No, I don't have any information on that one. Sorry, I don't know.
Oh, you don't have the notes? Any notes?
Cost letter. No, I don't. I don't have that in here. No, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. That was all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just check my notes for 1 second. Okay. No, I am good. Okay, so Mr. Neufeld, Mr. Mercury, please go ahead with your presentation.
I'll just start on the liability question. And again, at the outset, there's no disagreement in terms of the vast majority of this building being a personal care home is subject to a school tax exemption. The parties also agree that a portion of the space is to be fully exempt as it is used as a place of religious worship. So the section in particular that we're concerned about is section 22 sub 1 sub I of the Municipal Assessment Act, and the question which indicates that where the space is occupied and used by a religious denomination primarily as a church, synagogue, or place of religious worship. So the key there is what portion of the space is used primarily for that particular purpose, whether it be for a synagogue or a place of religious worship. What you'll hear from Mr. Neufeld is that, and going back to page 10 of the brief, you can see the photographs. There's a smaller area that you can see with some seats, which is your, whether you call that the initial area where people congregate. However, our information is that the multi-purpose room was specifically designed and situated there to accommodate the primary purpose of that space is for the religious worship activities, which in this case would occur on Saturday primarily. And so Mr. Neufeld can comment on that further. Obviously, the space is available for other purposes, but what is the primary purpose of it? It is, in fact, for religious worship. So the next question becomes, how does that change your calculation in terms of the overall percentages? As I look at Mr. Valderrama's brief, he has 182,000 of the entire assessment as fully exempt for this particular space. So ignoring the land, taxable land component, my calculation is Mr. Valderrama has that space at roughly 0.06% of the overall building area. And so Mr. Neufeld's calculation, he can take you through the building plan if necessary, but you'll note on Mr. Neufeld's brief, if you include the what I'll call the overflow space, it takes us to believe to 1.84%. Is that correct? Okay. So.
Sorry, could you repeat that number? I'm sorry.
1.84% would include the overflow area for the religious worship area.
Thank you.
And again, this is just a matter of determining the correct allocation. I've included, or we've included in the Collier's material, a couple of cases on this particular point where there has been disagreement in the past as to the full extent of the religious worship exemption. And I won't spend much time on it other than to just simply bring it to your attention in Mr. Neufeld's brief. There's just a couple of cases I wanted to just highlight for you. And they're found at pages 63 forward. Very briefly, one of them, the first one was a case called Canadian Sunday School Mission, the Court of Appeal. The question was whether a particular portion of the space which was used for preparing religious instructional materials was included as part of this exempt space, which was used for a church, synagogue, or other place of religious worship. And the court held that it was. It didn't necessarily have to be the people there constantly or every day of the week. The second case is a case called Assessor versus Gateway Soap and Chemical and Vineyard Christian Fellowship. Similar issues. This case, there was no, again, there was some storage space that the church was using that was used to house its materials. There were some other materials in there, but the primary purpose of that overflow storage space for the church was in fact determined to be ancillary to the place of religious worship, and so the exemption was extended to that area as well. So here we're not talking about storage space; we're talking about the physical space that's actually used for religious worship and clearly meets the requirements of the Act. So if one follows that or extends that through, it's simply an adjustment to the proportionate amount of the exempt space in the building. So those are my comments, and Mr. Neufeld will continue and can provide some additional information on the dimensions if necessary, and then deal with the other issues in appeal. Unless you wanted to question me on that in advance or split up or just save it till the
end. Maybe we'll just wait till the end. We'll let Mr. Neufeld do his presentation and then just do all the questioning at once.
Okay, I don't know if I'm too loud or not, but I'm kind of doing that on purpose. I'm not yelling at anyone. I just know this room's got horrible acoustics. So I'm not being overly assertive. And for the record, I wasn't picking on Ryan here. We get along great. I just, the room. Okay, background on this property. Mr. Mercury and myself were engaged by WRHA in 2016. So we've been working on this for 4 years. And our mission here is to try to fix the problems with assessment of personal care homes. And page 27 of my report shows how we approach this. And there's not a lot of details there, but there's a graph there. And there's a line in blue, and that's a rate per bed, assessment per bed. The blue ones are all the ones we filed under appeal. The red ones are ones we did not file appeals on because they were all much lower. By the way, that spike on the red that's an error. That's the Lions, and it's got other stuff happening in it. What the big concern is with the WRHA, our client, is that they fund these properties the same amount of money. Now, some of it is paid to a maximum by the person in care, and the balance is paid by the government. The actual operating costs are about $72,000 a year per bed, and I think the maximum is somewhere around $32,000. So it's kind of bothersome for us. We look at this, and but a lot of these are assessed at $20,000 to $30,000 per bed in value. So this is what we started to do. Our goal is to try to have less of a gap. And what the problem is that the cost approach employed by the city doesn't take into account all the specific issues on a very specific property type. And it is not an appropriate tool to use without all the proper depreciations applied. then the numbers should be much narrower. And as a matter of fact, we've been working on years to try to find an intelligent way of doing an income approach on these, because it is really simple. $72,000 per year per bed is the cost of running it. Percentage of that goes to capital costs. That would level the field. And because the inequity in this is, from a personal point of view, you can have a bad home being very profitable with low taxes, and a very good home, which we'd all like to see, paying higher taxes because they're doing their job right. So this was why we took on this job. And right now, the number of care homes we're working on is only 7. There are 7, and these care homes are assessed at $130,000 per bed or higher. And our goal is to bring them down to at least a much closer relationship, because the average on the rest of the ones in Winnipeg is about $39,000 per bed. So we have 7 homes that are assessed 3 times higher than the average for the rest. And if we're stuck with the cost approach, then it must be done properly. So going back to our workup on it, and this is presented in very summary fashion, and it's a little bit disjointed, but it's pretty much provides the essential issues that we want to bring forward. And on page 2, we did look at income style approaches. They're indirect. We looked at direct comparison approaches, and there were a number of sales. And then we looked at the cost approach, which was actually summarized on page 1. So starting on page 3 with the cost approach, the first problem with what the assessment department is using is they've got the wrong Marshall and Swift category. And on page 3, I've clipped out from my book right here what we're using in Marshall and Swift. And it is multiple residence section 352, which is what you're supposed to use, because as you read at the header below, multiple residences including senior citizen, assisted living, and retirement complexes, not hospitals. None of these are hospitals. Personal care homes are not hospitals. Once a patient reaches the point where more assistance is required, they're moved into another facility, more of a long-term care. For example, the private ones, the Waverly and the Rosemount. I had a relative in there. They started in the Waverly, and as they needed more care, they moved to the Rosemount. Now, once they move to the Rosemount, you become a different category. You're now, as the assessor is describing, convalescent care, although without the therapy rooms. But in this particular building, that's not what goes on. So we have the cost listed here from Marshall and Swift, and in the manual, it's slightly different.
Page you're on there? What page are you on?
I'm on page 3. In the manual, it is slightly different in that it's showing you the numbers. And so I have section 352 here, a bit easier to read. And at the bottom, it also has the basements costs on it as well for this particular multiple residence. Towards the bottom of that page, the difference between class C and D buildings. I don't know how legible yours are, but I do have the printout here. A C building is concrete block, generally steel, well, steel have to be steel frame with that. Class D building is wood frame and combinations. Now this building is predominantly wood frame. Now moving ahead, just to show you some pictures, on page 8 and 9 are the one on the, these two come from Google Street View, and you can see that I've got the date, September 2007, and it's showing the building under construction. This is the addition. On page 9, the building, you can see that the vapor barrier is being applied to the particle board walls. The only masonry there is towards the right side, the stairwell, which is masonry because it's a fire code issue. Stairwells have a greater fire capability. So you'll see the elevator shafts and the stairwells be concrete block. Now, while I was doing this,
Is there firewalls throughout there as well? Is there firewalls throughout the building?
I didn't notice from the inside, but I'm sure it applies to the National Building Code covers that. While I was doing this, and incidentally, I live 2 blocks away from this property. I watched it go up. It's wood. There's no doubt there. There is where they've used the masonry, as I mentioned, is the fire escapes, elevator shafts, and then there's some steel framing in the front lobby because it's got a large clear space. So as part of this project, I engaged Gateway Construction, and you probably are familiar with Gateway Construction. And I asked them to review the information, the historical pictures, and they said, yes, this is a wood frame on concrete foundation would be classified as. There are a mix of different uses types in there, but it's predominantly a wood framed building. Now, you'll note that going back to page 3, that the costs vary on the quality as well as the type of construction. So we selected, but the major issue here is the type of building we selected, because you'll note that on page 3 that these are US numbers, by the way, they get modified later, that the excellent in Class C is 135 per foot and only 25 cents or 35 cents lower in masonry with veneer. And this is masonry with veneer. So we've selected the excellent category, and that's just because my knowledge of Marshall and Swift that they're rather deficient on the substandard ones. So if you take a standard of average, you'll find that building doesn't need Canadian National Building Code generally, because they have different codes all across the country, county codes and thermal efficiencies, which would not meet Canadian code. So we've used the top one, and also we've used not using the package system, but the warm and the cool air. You can see what we've described. And the rebuttal information I sent on what the assessment department is using, 313, of course, there's none of that in here. There's no treatment rooms in here because there aren't treatment rooms. There's kitchens, and there's a synagogue, and there's some common areas, and there's a large foyer. That's what's in this building. So that is the right selection. Then on page 4, these are the modifiers, and there's local modifiers and time modifiers, and you can see the local modifier at the top of page 4 is 10% for D for Winnipeg, and this does account for currency changes as well, because our most of our building material is less than the material you would see in many southern areas. And you can see that it varies by city and by location, but Winnipeg has got a low cost to build. And that has to do with the labor factor as well, because Marshall and Swift isn't using a couple guys in the back of a pickup truck putting up a pole frame construction. They're using numbers that come from large construction companies, and generally our labor costs are lower here. Then at the middle class, it shows the cost indexing, and so what that is the book I took this from was a 2018 book, so we just costed it backwards by a factor of 3.5. You can barely read that. 0.055 percentage points for the cost for time of construction. Then moving into life expectancy guidelines. The first category was the outside paving, and you'll note that the life expectancy guidelines, and this is this book as well, range from 5 to 17 years, depending on the type of paving you have, and as well the climate. This is why we didn't even bother with outside improvements, because at this stage in their life, they've been fully depreciated. They'll need constant upgrade and repair as any paved area would. So under the cost approach, it depreciates a lot quicker than the building. Now, our building cost life on page 5, we've selected our same category here, which is 55-year life. And this is based on what a remaining economic life. And when you're using the age life method, which is, I'll show you the theory later, it's straight line. There's none of this messing around with trying to figure out if we are extending our life or shortening our life or anything else. The appropriate method in the appraisal world, both IAAO and AIC, are strictly an age life. And there's a whole chapter in that at the end about the selection of the age life method. So we started with a 55-year life. So just to walk you through some numbers, and on page 5 is the calculations. And we've broken this down by sections, and these are the sections that are actually in the assessment department's field sheets. We're sticking with the same numbers they have. I think we've matched them. But if we look at the first line, to take you through that first line, it's age 2000, and that's 1, 2, 3 refers to the section in the assessment field sheets. An area, stories, and then the total area. And the reason that doesn't extend is because there were different numbers. The numbers, the different sections of different buildings included. The 40,807 represents what the field sheets show. The number is 154.63 per square foot, which is based on going to the bottom set of numbers where that's labeled M and S 352, 2018 D excellent, showing that the cost was from the book at 135.17. There's no time adjustment needed. There's a local adjustment needed, and then there's a 4% adjustment made for handicapped, and that's described on page 3. It should be here. Yes, it says for complexes where all senior units are totally handicapped, increased cost by 4%, and that's for the barrier-free access things that have to be installed all throughout the building. So we've added the 4%. So our shell rate, our building rate, all in, not just the shell, 154.63. So this section then comes, going back to the top of page 5, comes out reconstructed cost new 6.3 million. We're using an age of 18 years. Now, I'm not going to fall into the trap of trying to split market years versus physical years, because in 2018, the first section was 18 years old. It's not 16 years old, it's 18 years old, the physical condition. And that's what you would use for depreciation, because you can't, you're trying to value a 18-year-old building in 2018 based on 2016 costs. That's the proper theory. So extending that, I get 32.7 depreciation, and the reconstructed cost new depreciated is 4.2 million. So we went through that whole exercise, and there's two sets of numbers. Our total cost new for 2018 was 24,623,000, and that compares to the assessment department's number of 32,135,000. So problem number one was they selected the wrong class of building, or it's not a hospital. if you're using Marshall and Swift, you got to use section 352, which is what this is. And then the next issue we're showing here is the concept of depreciation on an age life basis. And you'll have to bear with me as I show you that stuff at the end. At the bottom of the page, we've done functional obsolescence and external obsolescence. And the description of those are in the back. Functional obsolescence, in this case, are the super adequacies. Incurable super adequacies. They're built that way. And what those refer to are shown on page, starting on page 12. So I did have an opportunity to inspect these. I took these pictures. It was fall of last year. And I don't know if all the labels are clear, but there are 3 separate kitchens. For example, page 13, you can actually see the label, meat. That's the meat kitchen. Now, I know a fair bit about kitchens, and you're preparing meals for 200 people. Each of these kitchens on their own could handle 200 people in a personal care setting. It's overbuilt. Meat has to be kept separate from the dairy. And then the category of, I don't remember the word for it, but mixed is the 3rd category. And none of the 3 can meet. They have to have their own dishes, dishwashing areas, and serving tray areas. So on page 14 and 15 are 3 sets of dishwasher areas. Again, this is commercial kitchen capacity. This could easily handle 200 plus seats. Each of these sections, each of these has a commercial dishwasher in there, and they have their own supply of plates. Bottom of page 15 is a serving station. So the serving stations, there are, I'm just trying to get that. There are 8 separate areas, 8 where there are serving areas. There's what there are is in each of the 4 buildings, there's 1 per floor. So each section has their own. And so this picture on page 15 is a picture of the meat serving station. So this is actually in the common area where the meals are served in each of the building sections. And that space is done up. People wouldn't normally have to do it. Page 16, another overbuilt area, cooler space. And I don't have cooler numbers on it. I just included the numbers in the kitchen. But you got to separate your meat and your dairy from your other, because that's what those are their requirements. So the bottom of page 16 are my calculations. So out of the 155,000 square feet, 5,300 are what's called functional obsolescence. And we're not looking at the cost on these, just the square footage. You wouldn't need that square footage in the normal build out. So that has to be considered. This is a unique property. Then comes the question of external obsolescence. Now, external obsolescence, it can be from a variety of reasons. Economic, changing in code, making things obsolete that you can't control. So this was rather a widespread area. Now you can find your data from a variety of different sources, and I'll go through where I got my calculations from. The first was from I know that just some stock market searches, and these all happened at COVID, and it is post-reference. So you put what weight you would like on that, but they show the vulnerability. When COVID struck, the share prices of these buildings that were under attack dropped dramatically, and that is economic obsolescence. Those 3 ones listed are Canadian operators of assisted living facilities, personal care homes. They have a variety of different operators in them, and this shows the vulnerability of the property. That was something to consider, and I did have all those printouts in my workup somewhere. The next were provincial requirements, and I'll leave you to the article. I'll go to the articles on that. The Middle Church sale, which was a sale for $1, a $15 million assessment sold for $1. And there were some irregularities with financial reporting by some of the people operating it, and but it did end up, take this off my hands, health authority for $1. And that shows the vulnerability of this property type. They don't sell that well in the market like that. So the next inspection reports, PCH operators, provincial budget, they're all some articles I'll briefly go through. The conversion of a PCH to apartment, I actually have one of these sites that was altered, and that was a 47% cost just for the conversion cost. So that would indicate to get to a different highest and best use. It's post-reference, so the weight we're putting on it is it's supportive, and it is a physical issue, physical cost. This is on Sinclair. It sold for 3.2 million, and the cost to convert it to apartment is 1.5 million. Now we have on the bottom of page 17, these are the sales that happened for properties, and some information on all of them. And you'll note that there's an awful lot of $1 sales here and some very low end sales. And there's two that are indicating a sale price. And I have pictures of all of them on the following pages. Now the media release that Ryan was referring to, he's correct in that, but I'm not relying on it for anything other to show that the sale that occurred within the reference period for one of these was part of a portfolio sale. That's the $13.3 million sale and the $5.5 million sale. You notice they took place, a day apart from each other, but they were part of a portfolio sale, which included 32 facilities across Canada. And not only that, they were an equity sale where one party sold a partial interest to somebody else for shares in the corporation. And that's all I was showing with that. And that's why page 21 and 22 are in. Yes, page 20, I describe it, what they were. Despite those sales, the rate per bed is extremely low. And they're listed on page 20, at 21,000 a bed and 35,000 a bed, which is the key number to focus on. Page 23 are some land sales, and there's some backup on this later, which I'll briefly go over, but I was looking at several sales and trying to find ones that had that sort of an influence. And the top sale on 3003 Waverly was sold to Manitoba Housing from Hydro. So it's not, what this was some land adjacent to Waverly West that Manitoba Housing wanted to put a geothermal and needed extra land. And there's only one, there are two PCH sales. There's one in Northtown, and this was a combination church and PCH. This is the Mormons property, $451,000 an acre. And the other one was on Lee Boulevard, which is an older sale at $56,000 an acre. And that was a sworn value. And that's actually one of the properties we have under appeal, the $56,000 per acre. The problem, as I mentioned, when going through this, is that whatever your highest and best use of your property is, must be the same as your sales. And that's why we weren't considering the Mormon sale, because actually I was the appraiser on they were buying multifamily land from Manitoba Housing for the same rate as everybody else in the neighborhood. It wasn't a piece of land that it ended up having a PCH built on it, but they were paying apartment market for it. Whereas the one in Lee, it was a restricted use already. It was the Nazarene College. So it was already under that use, a different type of usage. And I know we're not supposed to compare assessments, but
That is correct.
and you can put the weight on it you like. But we've been working for WHA for 4 years, and those are the assessments at the hospitals per acre for their excess land. I'm bringing this up not to compare assessments, but to compare assessment methodology. In the hospitals, they're following the right methodology. They're applying a value of the land, of the excess land, on the same highest and best use as the principal use, which is a hospital. Yet for the PCH, they're not. They're going to a market value. You have to consider the actual highest and best use. So if you would like to use apartment land as your comp, that's fine. Put in the cost for demolition or conversion. And that's what's missing here. And that's why what we're looking at is a rate of 200,000 per acre. Oh, page 24 is the zoning, and I said in the earlier page that you can put a care home on virtually all zonings, and you can see, yes, you can. You can put it in A zoning, in most all the residential zonings, half of the C zonings, but not in industrial zonings. So you can put it anywhere, but the point is, once you put it there, you have the highest and best uses altered by the building you put on top of it. And also, bottom of page 24, House of Worship has even greater flexibility of where they can be located. Of a particular note, on page 25 and 26 are the parking requirements. And a couple of reasons we're showing you this is, number one, you can see on page 25 that a assisted living facility has a very low parking requirement. Like, because people aren't a lot of cars anymore going to the site. And this is pretty much standard with what you observe at sites. There's less parking. Going back to our highest and best use argument, it's not the same as an apartment. There's a different law, a bylaw affecting this. It has its own. Less parking. Again, consider in your valuation. Page 26, you'll note that place of worship has a higher parking requirement. And in my mind, this helped set our place of worship land requirement. It's not an equal ratio to the building, because a place of worship requires more land than an assisted care facility. And so it would be a slightly different number. And I put that all through at the end. Page 27, I'm just repeating myself here at the sales. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. I was talking about Portage and Fort. And I was giving you their assessments per bed, but their sale prices per bed were 91,000 and 64,000. Still considerably higher than the subject, but again, the sale was a share swap, best way to call it. And then the middle church, of course, $1 is $1. On page 28 is a summary of what I said about the ones that we've appealed. And you can see that the ones that we've placed under appeal are these are older numbers too. This is from the first year, so some of these have changed. But you can see our subject property is assessed approximately $156,000 per bed, and then there's the rest of them listed below. The sheet was also prepared for another reason, that the number at the bottom is $6 million. And bear in mind, I'll come back to the $6 million. Sorry,
Mr. Neufeld.
not that good. Okay, that was, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, I didn't want to interrupt Mr. Neufeld in the middle of his presentation, but if you're okay with taking a brief recess.
I can hear my phone off.
Okay, so sure, we can take a brief recess then if everyone
Thank you.
is okay with that. Okay, I will call this meeting back to order. Mr. Neufeld, please proceed when you are ready.
Thank you. I'm at page 29, and this is from a book called Residential Long-Term Healthcare Financial Tables. It's an organization that works with all the healthcare authorities in Canada. And these are the Manitoba numbers. I was telling you earlier that the costs are $71,000 a year, and all the costs are listed here. They're op costs and building costs. Page 30, top of page 30, shows you the revenue, and deliberately nonprofit. Actually, it looks like they're losing $90 a bed. That's per bed per annum. One of the things earlier we talked to Ryan about is who pays for what. You can see that of the revenue, in this case 605, because that's million, that 122 comes from residential copay. So roughly about 20% of the revenue is collected from the residents, and the rest is all government finances from other areas. And you'll note that the other earnings, like other agencies, I'm not sure if I've included it here, but there's a contract you sign in a personal care home. Essentially limiting your right to increase the costs or do anything. It's very tight and controlled on that, because they obviously, governments don't want to pay more money, so it is restricted. Now, this was on bottom of page 30 was just something that I had read. This was something that 20 years ago, I think Dave Saunders was putting forward this argument, and I think the assessor has put the brief, the municipal board decision in his brief, and you know, this is a hypothetical analysis, looking at the money, which is a loss or a break even. You could potentially characterize these as bachelor suites, and when I just took the numbers on the bachelor suites and just used pretty much typical expense ratios and cap rates, it really doesn't matter, but it would show that the rate per bed is between $50,000 and $60,000 on that, on a hypothetical basis, requiring a change in zoning and highest and best use, however. Page 31 are outside pictures from a variety of different sources, mostly Google Earth. I might have taken one or two of these. Oh, no, I didn't. Moving on, and apologize, this isn't in order. This is just, I was just trying to put this all together back when we first were supposed to have this hearing back in several months ago. It was actually, it's postponed, adjourned twice, I believe. Anyway, these aren't, none of this is my work. These are quotations. The first is the Appraisal Institute, 3 types of depreciation required. And then the next is the IAAO, Province of Manitoba Assessment Services on this. And then on page 34 is from the IAAO, is from one of their handbooks on application of depreciation. So they don't say just physical depreciation. That's the point here. Page 36 is one of two orders that I put in, and this was, both of them are for unique properties with economic obsolescence and external obsolescence. Or sorry, I get the words right. I always mix these up. They deal with physical, functional, and economic depreciation, these two orders. The first is on the Gulf Dome, understandably a unique property. And this is a very interesting case. Mr. Mercury was in attendance, and the counsel was his uncle Michael. And I remember this. Michael was instant depreciation, instant depreciation. It's like buying a new car. It's not physical factors. It's just you put it on the ground, it depreciates. And the order is funny because after this came out, it looks like, oh, they actually increased it. No, they didn't. They set the age life table, which was key, and then they applied additional depreciation. Now they ended up applying 50% depreciation in economic, functional, but not physical. The physical was done differently. Now, we're talking about age life, and bottom of page 47 is the discussion on the realistic lifespan was probably 9 to 10 years. And what they did is they set an age life table for us, straight line age life table. So the next year after this, when it was after the physical depreciation, it was after that it was 4 years older, and then they had to change the physical depreciation from 10% to 40%, because that's what ended up happening here on this. So the two factors that were here, they're important, is the fact that an age life was set, not some crazy computer printout that you can't even question, but they actually said this is what we're applying on age life. And then the fact that there's economic obsolescence as well. And then they do discuss the landscaping, and their words were relatively minimal cost. They just applied one, in their words, for convenience. The truth is the grade beam and the paving were much older than the dome. This is when the dome had a new cover put up, so it was a replacement dome. This is the peel on it. So this is, and you can see on page 46, I have a variety of stuff that I brought forward, and some of the wording about me isn't quite complimentary, but the point is, this was a good decision when it was all said and done, because we brought them all the issues we had. And I actually believed, and I still believe to this day, this isn't a building, and it should have been. You can't call it a building. And if you do want to call it a building, you have to depreciate it a lot more than that, because it's so different and subject to the elements. The glass skin got replaced because it was taken down 2-3 times by snowstorms. That's not good depreciation. But this was their decision, and it wasn't. I thought it was worth noting here. The next page 49, is the rezoning basis of the rezoning agreement, and page 50 and 51 have it in, and then it was approved, and then back in 1997, I believe. And then again, when they put an addition on in 2006. Now, what's important here is on page 53 is the title. And you'll note that the zoning agreement is registered on title. So when we go back to our concept of highest and best use, It is not for an apartment block, because there's a legal restriction on the property. It cannot be an apartment block. It is a care facility. It's a personal care home. And that's what's key on the land sales right here, is this zoning restriction. We have a legal restriction. So you can't use other land sales. You got to find personal care home where it was, and they don't exist. And but it's a downward impact on value. Now, I don't know if this is scanned in as a separate document or not, starting with page 57. First two pages, 57, 58, those are the share sales I was talking about. And it was just showing what happened when COVID hit. It's not meant to say everybody should get, this should be applied. It's meant to show you how vulnerable this type of building is to natural problems. Now, the articles that follow are came out during the COVID time, but there's some that are really important to look at, and the rest support this. For example, the first one on page 59 discusses the requirement for funding and the sentence here, and so a lot of the oversight, the funding, the protocols under the umbrella of the Canada Health Act really have not been a part of long-term care to begin with. Just saying that there's a lot of deferred issues that they're dealing with. And page 60 talks about the immediate changes and then long-term fixes. This all came out. And page 62 talks about a local story about they're chronically underfunded, understaffed, government needs to help. We all know all these issues that came up. But page 63 is fourth sentence, paragraph. Another, aging infrastructure is another issue. The association estimates care homes in Manitoba's nonprofit sector each need an average of $6 million in upgrades. That's, and this hasn't just happened yesterday. And of course, there's actually a quotation from the subject property on this. Bottom of page 63, the health department did come through with some funding for safety upgrades in personal care homes to ensure the facilities are in line with fire code requirements. That is obsolescence. Fire codes changed. 2007 was the last national building code upgrade. The site was built before then. Another thing, they're looking at outside shelters, page 65, and safety upgrades coming in months. Now, again, the article I'm looking for was discussion. It was a quote from the Canada's senior health officer, Dr. Tam, about that these are chronic issues, and I thought I had marked it in here, but it's in here, and I'm not going to spend all the time looking for it. But what it says is this isn't just COVID. This has been a problem that's been a long-term requirement for the funding for obsolete parts or obsolete things in the buildings, and it's just COVID that triggered it. Page 68 is the Middle Church sale. Page 70 is an audit, just talking about that there are. No, that was just part of the Middle Church. Page 72 is inspections, unannounced inspections, about how there are problems in the healthcare, in the personal care homes, and that's I guess what I'm saying with these articles is this all came to light during the COVID time because they came under more scrutiny, but these are all long-term problems that they all have to face. Page 77, again, it's repeating third last paragraph. In the nonprofit sector, Marsh estimates homes need an average of $6 million in upgrades per home. Yet a recent 25-year period saw little to no increase in provincial funding, while inflation over those years was 57%. So it's a long-term problem. And again, page 79, they've put the number of $6 million is the requirement, the average per home. I thought I marked it up. Anyway, the next section is the nurse's report. That's written sideways, and it just says the same thing from a different perspective. Going to page 73. This is another municipal board order on a unique property. In this case, Mr. Mercury and myself both represented the Assissippi Ski Hill, and ironically, the province was represented by Denny Gannett, who wrote the decision on the Golf Dome earlier, and he's now gone back to work directly for the government. So it's just a small world. It's the same issues in terms of the assessment department came by and said, just physical. That's the only depreciation that applies. It's a ski hill. And after it was all said and done, the board ended up applying 45% blended physical depreciation and 5% functional obsolescence. So they ended up applying 50%. And the assessment department was initially at, I believe, 18% overall. And page 77, I've circled that. Taking guidance from the municipal board order, the Golf Dome, the total combined physical deterioration, functional obsolescence for special use properties is reasonably set at 50%. So there have been board orders on special use properties. Page 16 to the end is the depreciation and how it's done, and page 81 talks about market extraction method, age life method, and the breakdown. And I was telling you about we use age life, and so this is the whole. This is right from the textbook on how it's done. Determine the remaining economic life, remaining useful life. So you already start with that, and then top of page 84, the physical, functional, and external considerations. All of these must be applied. This is how we're taught, and this is what must be done. And often it's just so easy to do the physical and move along with it. But the chapter, and I mentioned super adequacy, discussion of that on page 100, and incurable super adequacy, a component that exceeds market requirements. It represents a cost without any corresponding increment in value, or a cost that the increment in value does not meet, which is 3 sets of kitchens. Again, that's just a small part of our calculation. And that's taking you through, and I think I just skipped over, you just go right back now, finish off my presentation. And giving you the bare part of it, going back to page 10 and 11, which I did skip over, Mr. Mercury addressed it, is on page 10, there are 2 pictures. One is a picture of a small prayer room. There's 24 seats in there. That's the capacity. There are 200 residents in this facility. So this is certainly not designed to accommodate the residents of this facility. And especially considering that this is faith-based operation. It is open to anyone. It is predominantly people practicing Judaism. And 24 seats, I'm not trying to be funny here, but this is a realistic thing. As you approach the end of your life, you want to make peace with your maker because you're worried about what's on the other side. The older you get, the more you pray. They use all the room. And now the other room is also a multi-purpose room, but there is an altar in the room, and along the walls it is covered with religious symbols and artwork, and they use it for different things. At the time I came in, which was midweek, they had some tables set up. Nothing wrong with that, because it was primarily designed as a synagogue, and just like any church anywhere, you show up on a Wednesday, there might be a funeral. Saturday there's a wedding, Sunday there's church. It's all called church. Same here. Saturday morning, temple, and the other parts of the week, other things. Now, as I said, I live by here every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, and then at 11 o'clock, I drive past as I'm going for coffee. And there are hundreds of people going here, not hundreds, I don't know, more than 10, probably 70 to 120, depending if it's the holidays, high holidays or not, who are dressed for synagogue, and it's kind of obvious when they're dressed for synagogue, who are going to this building. That's what it is. Page 11 shows that the occupant load is set for the entire room, 135 people. That's both rooms here. And page 11 is an excerpt from the blueprints, which I have there, where we got our measurements from. And you can see it is a self-contained closed facility, and it's open to the outside. You can get in from outside of the building as well as through, but well, not right now, you can't. And that takes us all back to firstly to page 5, and where we had set our external obsolescence at 40%. That's based on everything I've told you, and the number is 7.1 million for 2018. And remember what I said about that number of 6 million. That's the average per home. This one's a bit larger than most. So that 7.2 million is quite a reliable number. This is what someone would know the site is deficient by. And it doesn't matter who's paying for it. It is what it is. Let's just say the government gives them money and they upgrade it. 5 years from now, they're in the same boat, because that's the changing nature of healthcare. It's always, it's a requirement to have more permanent funding to do it. And as a result, it's something that permanently impacts the requirement for obsolescence. Back to page 1, we have our bottom of page 1. There's 2 sets of tables. The first is for 2018. So we're using all of those numbers, and we're showing you that our reconstructed cost new depreciated is 10,776,000 plus 7.2 acres of land at 200,000, and that's the total assessment. Then our breakdowns show the difference between the school, the exempt, and the taxable portions. And the acreage that's done here, there's something I discovered this, and I'm not even sure if it goes with the act or not, but when their cost approach is applied, each section carries its own exemption. Now, for example, 2 acres under a personal care home is school exempt, and that's the second line. Under the place of worship, it carries a separate exemption as fully exempt. And we've calculated that space out at half an acre, and that's based on, like earlier, 135 seats. That's the amount of space you would need for 135 seats, and it's a fairly easy calculation. We tend to use a rate of 400 square feet per car, which is 54,000 feet, but then only having half the double up per car coming to the site. So that's how I estimated half an acre for the synagogue, and the number at the bottom. So the building portion is calculated at 1.84% of the building cost, but the land portion is calculated at half an acre because of the parking. So that's why the numbers vary. And then the balance of the land is fully taxable, which is 4.7 acres at 940,000. Yes, this represents a very large difference from the assessment. And no, we're not posturing. We're not trying to be greedy. This is the right thing to do. It's a way to get the 7 homes that are so grossly overassessed to at least down close to the other ones. And the last thing on it is something that really bothers me personally is to see that the same funding goes into poorly run old homes with double occupancy, and that same funding is to support quality homes. Economically, the funding is the same. The assessments should be the same. And if the cost approach can't figure out a way to reach that, or at least get close, the cost approach is the wrong tool. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Valderrama, do you have any questions for Mr. Mercury or Mr. Neufeld?
None at the moment, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Marks.
I've got no questions at all, Madam Chair.
Mr. McIntyre.
I think I have one or two. So you're representing the medical authority?
Yes.
Why only the 7 homes?
We were given all of them to do, and we chose the 7 on a assessment per bed basis. It was a way to try to bring some equity to the system. And truthfully, we've had some, I can tell you these discussions we've had with the assessor. They've said, you know, maybe on that basis, some of the ones at the lower end should be higher. And there's 3 homes that are like 20 and 24,000. I said, yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you there. You've over depreciated them because they're in old buildings and they're getting the same funding. That and that's on the table. Obviously, can't change them now, but we're not opposed to it. We're looking for equity.
Okay. The other question about the kitchens, given the footprint of the building and the number of stories, could one kitchen really serve all those people at the same time?
No, I didn't bring my diploma with me. I have a plaque.
No, it's a yes or no answer.
Yes, it could. I've worked in the restaurant business before this, and I was actually part of the committee that designed new restaurants. And so there's very simple ways of looking at the capacity of the buildings and the meals they make. A lot of steamed stuff, not a lot of heat on contact, serve immediately. I think the capacity in each of these kitchens is probably funny. I was in a 500-seat restaurant the other day that had their individual kitchen was smaller than any of the single ones that was here. So yes, I believe, and the dishwashing by far, I mean, it's not even an issue there. Yeah, the kitchens definitely could have 200, 300, 400 people.
So are these meals served in the rooms of the occupants?
They vary. You can have them served in the room, or you can go to the common area. There's 8 of them spread through the building and eat there.
So you're not talking about a typical restaurant operation?
No, but well, let's just say you've got one kitchen and 4 serving areas through the building. So then on just one type of food. So you're preparing the food, then you're moving it to the serving area and keeping it warm there. And you've got a longer lifespan of the cooked product. Or you deliver it to the room and you're putting it in a cart and you're taking 20 minutes to deliver to several people. So it's being held warm. So you're not doing 200 meals all at once. That's why I know that they've got capacity there.
Okay. And that was it. That's all my questions.
Thank you very much. And I have no questions at this point, so guess then we will move on to 2020 and 21. Mr. Valderrama, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next one has a file number of 19-6009. We're dealing with the roll year of 2020 on same roll number 03093-003200. Is located at 1 Falcon Ridge Drive. We're using a reference date of April 1st, 2018. And there are 3 classification and liability. The first one is classified as institutional property and taxable and assessed at $3,348,000. The second one is assessed as an institutional property exempt with an assessed value of $192,000. And the next section is classified as an institutional property taxable school exempt with an assessed value of $32,285,000. The total assessment for the entire property is $35,825,000. That's for 2020. Again, the property is a nursing home with 1 to 3 stories, 4 sections, with an effective years built of 2001 to 2008. Construction class is masonry bearing walls with an average wall height between 10 to 12 feet. Is zoned as a residential multifamily, has a land area of 313,426 square feet, a planned area of 76,386 square feet, basement area of 15,718 square feet, and a gross floor area of 155,342 square feet. The next page, page 2, is the cost valuation summary. The replacement cost new for the building is $34,904,011. It has an accrued depreciation for the building of $4,075,011, giving it a depreciated cost of $30,829,000 for the building. The next line is the depreciated cost for the detached structures of about $189,000, giving it a total depreciated cost for all buildings and improvements of $31,018,000. With a land value of $4,807,000, the total value is $35,825,000. And right below on page 2 are different building sections for the property. And on page 3 are a couple of aerial photos of the subject property. Page 4 are the details of some of the detached structures, and right below it is the land valuation. On page 5, the classification and liability allocation. The first one, again, is the 40 school taxable exempt. It is an area of 93,295 square feet for the land, and a land value of $1,431,000. The second section or area of the land is fully taxable. It has an area of 218,315 square feet, or a land value of $3,348,000. And the last section of the land is exempt. It has 1,816 square feet with a land valuation of $28,000. And the building, there are 2. The first one is an institutional taxable school taxable exempt or school tax exempt, and it has a total of $30,854,000. And then the second one is the 40 institutional exempt, which is about $164,000. So in total, the summary and the last section of page 5, the first one is 40 school tax exempt, which is a total of $32,285,000. The next section is for the institutional taxable, which is about $3,348,000. And the last section of both land and building is institutional exempt of about $192,000. On page 6 are some land sales comparables. There are 4. The first one is located on Pembina Highway. It was sold in March 2018 for about $32.79 per square foot. It is, it is 152,469 square feet. The second sale is located on McGillivray Boulevard. It was sold in August 2017 for $20.82 per square foot. It is 469,729 square feet. The third one is located on North Point Boulevard. It was sold for $14.22 per square foot. Sold on February 23, 2017. It has a land area of 198,720 square feet. And the last land sale is located on El Tasi Drive. It was sold in January 2016 for $14.34 per square foot. And the land area for that one is 113,657 square feet. Right below the chart is the map of the subject property and comparable land sales. And on page 7 is the zoning details for the subject property. From page 8 to page 12 is where the cost report for 2020. And I'd just like to add the 2 appendices that I left out or I forgot a while ago. There's one appendix for interior photos that I included. These are the photos from the website of simkincenter.ca. And the second appendix that I also attached is the list of permits that were closed for the previous old roll number.
Sir, is this in your report?
Appendix. Yes, I included it for 2021, which I'm just discussing all at the same
No,
time.
I'm not trying. I didn't want to interrupt you. Sorry.
No.
I don't think I have that.
I sent it by email. Did you get it? You got it?
Yeah. No, I have the briefs here. That's all I have. So, no, I just have this is all I have. Is it in there?
It's separate.
Oh, is it separate? Okay, I didn't get it.
Appendix.
I didn't get it attached.
I think they're pretty much the same as what you've attached. Yeah, for the permits, back in 2008, permits that already totaled to about 22,970,000 for building addition, and in 2009 and 2010 there were building additions. However, the costs were not disclosed based on the first page, and I think that's all that I have for 2020. And for 2021, it's pretty much the same. If I could just read through the file number, Madam Chair.
Please.
Yeah, so for 2021, the file number is 20-356. Again, the roll number is 03093003200. And the address is 1 Falcon Ridge Drive. It has also the same assessment and split classification and liability. I think that's my presentation, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Neufeld, Mr. Mercury, do you have any questions for the assessor regarding 2020 and 2021?
Again, with respect to the place of worship, I take it is that the prayer room will describe it as the only space that you've allocated for the totally exempt space. You haven't included any of the adjacent space that we talked about earlier.
No, the other one, no. Yeah, there, that's it.
And you
That's it.
haven't given any, extended any portion of that exempt space to the land, correct? Only to the building?
Looking at page 5 of my brief, there is, I think it pertains to the land area of 1,816
That's
square feet.
the square footage of the building that you've, the excess land, I guess I'm referring to, that you're,
Oh, the taxable?
the
fully
taxable, yes.
Yeah, it's about 280,315 square feet, roughly.
No element of that is allocated to
None.
the exempt portion.
Not the taxable, no. There's a 1,816 square feet that's allocated as an exempt.
With your land sales that you refer to at page, yes, page 6, I believe, you have your land sale comparables.
Yes, that's correct.
Did you search the titles of any of those land sales?
No, I did not.
All right. So you wouldn't know if there were, you've seen the title with respect to the subject property. Mr. Neufeld brought that to your attention in his brief earlier.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and you'll note that there is a restrictive covenant and a zoning agreement that is registered against title to the subject property.
That's correct.
Okay, and you would agree that those restrictive covenants would have an impact on market value for any prospective purchaser?
I am not sure if there would be. However, as far as the presentation that happened or that was presented, it was requested to have a zoning change or
Yes.
to accommodate. So it was included in the caveat. So I'm not sure if there would be impacts, negative, positive impacts on the prospective buyer.
And so just looking at Mr. Neufeld's earlier brief, which refers to the city approval and the zoning agreement, requires that any building or structure be subject to community committee plan approval prior to the issuance of permits. And they were granted permission to construct an additional 120 bed addition here for this property. So any further improvements on this site would have to obtain committee plan approval, correct?
I don't know what the process is, so I'm not sure.
But just generally speaking, you would agree that a prospective purchaser will have to look at any caveats on title to ensure that they comply with them before approving the land, correct?
Of course, yes.
Okay, those are my questions. Mr. Neufeld may have some additional questions.
The pictures here, you see any treatment rooms here?
Yeah, as I mentioned, these are from the website, so no, I don't see any
The hair salon, do you treatment room?
hair treatment room.
Mr. Neufeld, I think he's answered the question that, to the best of his knowledge, there are no treatment rooms, okay?
I just thought of, not,
I know.
okay. Did you go through all these permits? You said you didn't have the original one, but you do here, 7.5 million for new construction.
Which one was that again? I'm sorry.
On the permit page, there's a
Yep.
2002 permit. It's closed, 2000,
Right.
for 7.5 million, plus foundation making 8 million. So how many beds was that?
I'm not sure how many beds.
80 beds. So it's 100,000 per bed.
Okay.
Now, the next set of permits, only 7 years later, You don't have the details on where this was spent for the addition.
No, I don't.
I've just done a quick math and I'm getting about 175,000 per bed, but it's fair to say that building an addition costs a lot more than building a place new, or you believe that?
It depends on the timing. A lot of dependent variables come into play. If it's higher or lower, but no, I can't say if it's going to be higher, if it's addition, or lower, if it's just a new build.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
I thought it was funny. Okay. There's one treatment.
That's a fair treatment, right? Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Marks, do you have any questions?
No questions for me, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, nor do I. Okay, does anyone need a break before Mr. Neufeld begins his presentation? Or are we good? Hello?
Not going to be long. No.
Okay, Mr. Mercury, Mr. Neufeld, please proceed.
My comments will remain the same as the earlier presentation, so I don't think it's necessary to repeat them. I think the same issues apply with respect to the scope of the exemption. I would just add on the caveat on title, that is something that must be recognized by the City Assessment Department. Just as a matter of law, it is in fact settled about 21 years ago in a Court of Appeal decision called Freedant Investments, where in that particular case, the owner had entered into an agreement with CMHC which restricted the revenue it could bring in. It could only charge rents at a modified or lesser rate, which restricted the income producing ability of the property, and the court held that had to be taken into account in valuation. So of course, it very much depends on the caveat we're speaking of here, but in this case, the zoning agreement must be considered when looking at comparable sales, for example. So those are my only comments, and I won't repeat anything else that I already brought to the board's attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Neufeld?
Yes, there was just something, the only change is, it's the same document. The bottom of page 1 shows that the values are different. And you'll note that the values don't necessarily go up because depreciation, there's an extra 2 years of depreciation. That's why there's very little difference in the values. There was one thing I did want to speak to on construction costs on page 6. I skipped over it earlier, but the current, this is in the public domain, so I don't think I need a footnote or anything for it. The current Manitoba government construction cost per bed is $133,000. In 2016, it was $130,000. That's per bed. Now, the assessment department has a value of about $200,000 per bed on the cost approach. Remember, this includes all costs. So this is what the government's willing to spend on it. And the user agreements they sign with the people is they don't want them spending more because they have to subsidize it after this. You can see that the cost to run it is $71,000 a year after it, and they're paying the bulk of it. So these are all strictly controlled on the costs. So no one is building a site at $200,000 per bed and on the basis that and they're not going to be allowed to build it, let alone want to build it simply because they'd like it for themselves. Ontario, which is below, I only put this in because I found this based on the COVID issue, But in 2018, what Ontario does is they have a different system. They kind of give the owner capital funding every year. So the concept is that they would carry their own mortgage, and Ontario would give them the money. So their payments worked out to $196,000 per bed over 25 years, but present value calculation is $144,000 per bed in 2018. So 144,000, including your land, in an area of the country where the land costs more than Winnipeg. So we are on par across the country on costs. All governments are striving, because they're paying for it all, to have these set rates. There are two projects underway right now, one in Steinbach, one in Carmen. We know what the costs are. They're right in line with these funding estimates. It's post-reference cost material, but they build them according to these costs. That's why it's wood frame construction, and that's why it's not a convalescent hospital. It's a multiple residence with barrier-free modifications. Now, the only cost that may not have been 100% covered would have been the multiple kitchens. However, that's an obsolescence. So build it. It's still worth nothing afterwards, because it doesn't resonate on the market. So other than that, my numbers have been calculated the same way. And I point out that the 1.84% is only on building cost, not the land cost. So it's not 1.84% of the total assessed value should be exempt. It's just the building portion, because the land is a different ratio, because there's different legal rights attached to a church requirement for parking versus assisted living facility. So I told you that's brief. That's all I had to go over again.
Thank you very much. Mr. Valderrama, do you have any questions for Mr. Neufeld or Mr. Mercury?
No further questions, Madam Chair.
And Mr. Marks?
No questions at this time, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions, thank you.
Nor do I. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And I will now close this hearing.
I just had a brief summation.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I forgot about that. Sorry, Mr. Valderrama, any need for a summary?
No submission, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Neufeld?
As I said earlier, we're quite conscious of what we're doing. We are trying to hopefully get a system working for all personal care homes. We are talking to the assessment department. I don't think that they're necessarily opposed to it. I think they need some pushing to get us together so we can talk about it. It's wrong what's happening. Now, specifically, I mentioned earlier that there was a quotation I wanted to point out on the concept of economic obsolescence, page 59. Experts say the cracks in the long-term care system were evident long before the pandemic began. So I just wanted to, I told you there was a phrase in there, to point out that this isn't new information. It's not a COVID problem. It's people were paying attention to it. So the issues that we have are that the wrong Marshall and Swift category was used for costing. The right one is a lot lower, almost $10 million lower. The type of construction was selected wrong. You can see that in our workup, it's a difference of 35 cents a foot. On the assessor's workup, I think it's $10 a foot. But that's the wrong code. It's the wrong Marshall and Swift. The requirement is your page 16 or chapter 16 at the end of it was that if you're doing costing, you should start off by finding actual costs. If they're not available, get them from a local contractor who's worked on other projects. Last resort is a cost manual. That's what it says in our work. And that's what we have to do, especially for something that you're trying to tell someone is worth $40 million. It's not a little difference. It's a big difference. We have information on buildings being built, which are post-reference. We know that they're good. We know what 2 provinces are paying for homes. We have a letter from a very experienced contractor who has seen the building and given us his quotation as of 2015 at a little under 23 million. And then we have the cost manuals using the right section. So there's a great big mistake there. The depreciation, I think that decision on Assisipi says it all. It's been pretty much set that unique properties should have external obsolescence, 40 to 50%. And we've shown you the support for it. So this is case law on value. The temple has got the wrong size. And just to put this in perspective, my numbers don't look much different than the assessor's number. I'm working on a percentage of the whole project. I'm just sitting here extrapolating our calculation with the assessor's number. For 2019, it should have been 811,000 fully exempt for the synagogue. Or 2020, 904,000 for the whole synagogue. That's using half an acre of land and 1.84% of the building. So it is a huge difference on the temple portion of it. And lastly, the land. It's not just a question of the law, which of course it is, but it's a question of a proper appraisal. You don't select a usage that's different from your existing use for the land underneath a building you're appraising. That's wrong. And you got to use what it is. Now, granted, no sales out there, but it's not worth apartment land. Title restriction, park restrictions. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Thank you.